Okay. Hello, everyone, and we are here with Amelia Moses and Lee Marshall. Amelia is the director of Lead With Me, and Lee Marshall, well, if you don't know who she is at this point, having just watched her, I don't know what to tell you, but she's an actress who just pulled off a very compelling performance here, which was both spooky and seems like was a hell of a performance to put together. How did you do it?
Thanks. Yeah, well, Amelia wrote a really challenging script that I just wanted to be a part of. And I think it was a really collaborative process. It's something, I hope Lauren can join us soon, but it's something the three of us have talked about a lot, is that, you know, Amelia started with this blueprint of the script, and Lauren and I did our own work before coming to set. And then on set, we kind of got to explore and play on the day and figure things out. So I'd say the making of Rowan was certainly a group effort.
I want to ask, like, what allows you to feel comfortable enough to explore in this space? Because this is I was tired watching your performance. like literally felt exhausted.
It's also 12:45. Maybe that's why you're tired.
I'm talking about the first time I watched this film.
Fair.
Which was probably around 12:45 as well. But I'm a night owl, so like this is when I watch horror films, right? So, but no, I don't mean that. I mean, like, it feels like I'm a director, right? So I know like what a demanding performance looks like, and this feels like heavy, right? At least that's my interpretation. Was it exhausting? Like, did you have to like set that up in mind? Amelia, actually, you know, did you have to keep that in mind when you were asking these actors to go through these like very tough psychological moments, these tough psychological beats, to do something between takes, like to keep things light, to schedule things differently? Was that something you were consciously thinking about?
Yeah, well, I think Lee definitely had it the toughest out of all the three characters, and the film never really leaves her perspective or her face, really. So I don't think there was any scene that she wasn't in. So I think it was demanding in that way, of just like never really having a break, you know, just like, okay, you're in every single scene, right? I think it probably helped Lee, correct me if I'm wrong, but we shot in quite an isolated location, 2 hours north of Montreal, and in a cabin. That's exactly what you see on screen. Like, and so the environment definitely created kind of the sense of what the film would feel like as well. And I think that probably helped the actors with their performances kind of like feel really disconnected.
Right.
So I think kind of just the location actually made a really big difference. I don't know if I kept things light between takes. I think it depends on the scene. Sometimes you want to be like, okay, we're in it. Let's get it, you know.
Yeah.
Let's be dark for a bit and then we'll come out the other side. But it kind of depended on the scene, I think. And, you know, doing night shoots as well, I think naturally you just are exhausted, and then you should put that on screen.
Yeah, I mean, like, we definitely didn't break out of it between takes for a lot of the scenes because it was pretty heavy, and I think doing so probably would have slowed us down. But it's certainly, you know, we were doing what we love to do. So sure, it was a little taxing or a little emotionally difficult sometimes, but when you're doing what you love to do, it's never that draining. Like, it's still kind of charging your battery in whatever way works for you. But also it helped that we had such a great relationship. Like, Amelia and I have worked together before. We'll work together again. And Lauren's awesome. Ari is awesome. We had so much fun, like, offset. We actually lived together throughout the shoot. So we had lots of time to have fun on our downtime and just like relax. And then on set, we were there to work and have fun in a different way.
That's, you know, I'm always blown away when someone works within this contained limitation of budget and is able to build that into the story and to enhance the story because of it. So, I mean, I'm curious, really, how much that played into this self-contained feeling. Is there something that you would have done if you had more money that would have like been bigger? And because I think the film as it is, it works so well. You know, it's just so contained in this location, and it adds this isolation, paranoia. You know, I have this a creepy feeling going into it, and it's almost like a dreamlike state. So I'm kind of curious, like did that, like, is there something that you would have done if someone had given you like $1 million, would you have made a completely different film?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the budget limitations were woven into the script. Like I knew I wanted to make a feature quite quickly after, or as soon as I could after finishing film school. And so I wrote the script with that in mind, knowing that I wasn't going to be given a lot of money to make a first project. And then on top of that, I was trying to get this telefilm grant, which I knew how much it was for. Mm-hmm. So I've always tried to kind of use those limitations to kind of breed more creativity. And, you know, I think it's a really great thing to do when you really embrace those limitations. You're like, okay, let's work within that instead of being overly ambitious or overly, you know, it's, you know, you can still make an ambitious project because maybe it's emotionally ambitious or something else, but just kind of not trying to do everything under the sun, especially for your first project. So I knew by having limited characters and limited locations, it was kind of forced into that. And then kind of from thinking about those limitations came the idea of like these dynamics and this kind of paranoia and isolation and just letting everything kind of tie together within that contained, you know, contained location.
How much of, like, I'm kind of curious, have you had a chance to interact with your audience at all? Like, and I know that things have been virtual and stuff, but to get feedback, and if there's something that someone has said about this film that sort of surprised you?
Yeah, I mean, definitely engaging with audiences is pretty different. Our whole festival run has been virtual. I think we had one screening in Saskatoon that was live, but we were virtual. So we were looking into the theater, into the audience, which was the closest we got to kind of like a real life Q&A. But it was really cool, actually. There was, even that had a different feel to it because it was like kind of people really actually seeing people's faces and seeing people talk and stuff. Mm-hmm. I can't think of a particular take that's been surprising. I guess just kind of, yeah, the fact that the kind of like female friendship has kind of resonated with people, which is obviously kind of what I wanted, both in its darkness, but in its kind of love as well. Mm-hmm. Lee, I don't know if there's been any kind of interesting reactions that you've read about. I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely got, I think our main interaction has been with programmers like you, and being able to read some cool stuff that people have written about us online. Like, as an actor, I'm always a bit scared to meet my audience, not because I don't want to, but just like it's like a little nerve-wracking. So in some ways, the virtual experience has made this less stressful for me because I get to do everything from behind a screen, which is actually where I'm most comfortable. Yeah, it's weird. Like it's my first feature. Amelia and I are also both producers on the project, so we've been. The film has kind of had multiple lives for us because we like making a film on set is very different than what it's like to make a film after you shot it when you're dealing with sort of the paperwork side of stuff. So yeah, I think it was really great to kind of, after that period of shooting, focusing on sort of the post-production side, and then getting to relive the experience through the audience's eyes through film festivals, mostly all virtual. So yeah, nothing specific has stuck with me, but mostly just that people have received it, I think, the way we wanted them to, and they got many of the same themes and feelings that we got making it, which I'd say feels pretty good, actually. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a thing about leaving things too open-ended that can sometimes backfire. We were literally having a conversation with this. We were having a conversation about this on a programmer panel earlier with Robin Citizen from TIFF and Alex Mitchell from Austin, and we had all these programmers on, and we were all talking about like what's something that films do often that, you know, like sets you off or piques your curiosity. And one of the things was, you know, too open-ended. But I actually like the open-endedness of this film in some ways, because it doesn't beat you over the head with conclusions and rather lets you sort of ruminate on a feeling, which makes, I think, you know, at least it makes the film personal, allows the other person to allow, you know, let's be. So how much of that was intentional? Like, because basically you're leaving things out that you probably could have put in, which are conclusions, that answers to things. So what questions did you really want the audience to take away from this?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously it's definitely a matter of taste with ambiguity. Like, I really like that in films, and sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. It kind of depends on whether I'm connecting to the project or not, or to the movie or not. I guess I intentionally left a lot open, since it's very much kind of about Rowan's perspective of things, and her perspective is limited. And if we're tied to her as an audience, then our perspective is limited. And the open-endedness, maybe if you're talking about the ending specifically, like the film ends where the character has kind of completed her journey, I really felt like, so I don't feel like we need to know anything more. Like, she wanted something, which was this friendship, and it didn't work, based obviously to an extreme degree, but like that's essentially what happened. And yeah, I guess I kind of wanted things to be open, yeah, because it's through Owen's perspective, and she has a skewed perspective where she might be hearing one thing, but she's interpreting it in a certain way. So I always want to kind of stay in that area of, like, you know, things not always being clear, because I think that fuels a paranoid mind, and she is a very paranoid person and character. So those were kind of the intentions behind the ambiguity of certain things. Yeah.
I've been steering very clear of cliche questions. I've been trying to so hard.
I don't know if you've gotten any of these questions so far.
Yeah, some of these are new.
No, because I was talking with the director of Paper Spiders, and he said, I've literally, like, they did an entire festival run, and he's like, I haven't heard any one of these questions. It's like the super most interesting Q&A, but then the minute somebody tells you that, you're like, shit, now I really actually have to ask you a really, really generic question. Sorry, screen off. My screen is turning as my light, so give me a second here. Here we go. My super generic question, and I'm sorry for asking this, but who are your horror, do you have horror filmmakers that you've looked up to, films that really got you into the genre?
Yeah, probably Cronenberg's The Fly is a big one. That kind of got me more into, like, the body horror side of things, and realized it really resonated with me, that kind of like transformation sort of thing. And yeah, I mean, I like lots of kind of, you know, big ones, like The Shining is one of my favorite films for sure. I watched that way too young, but it really stuck with me. And he's not like classically a horror director, but I think David Lynch has like an atmosphere that is very horrific. And so that's, I think, tonally something that I feel like I really like in his movies, and that kind of inspired me. Yeah, I would say that's my answer.
That's really interesting. We have a comment here about the film. Won't Sleep at All gave me Candyman vibes. Odd comp. That's interesting.
It's a good movie. I like that movie.
The original, yeah?
Yeah. I mean, is there...
The first one.
Yeah.
There's three of them. And
I haven't.
They get progressively worse.
I haven't seen any of the sequels.
Normally happens that way.
Another big film that was a huge inspiration for me making this was Karen Kusuma's The Invitation. Yeah, so I'm a big fan of her as well. I love Jennifer's Body. And just like the tension in that film and the structure of, like, it takes us a long time to kind of figure out what's going on. But you go back and forth so much in that film of like, is it in this guy's head? Is it real? And so that was something that was kind of structurally a big inspiration for me for this film.
I think The Invitation was probably my favorite film of that year.
Yeah, I've rewatched it so many times. It's really a great rewatch.
Yeah, me too. And Lee, like you were, I mean, I don't like leaning into comparisons too much because it implies that the film is derivative, and it's not. Like but there is an overlap in terms of how I felt watching the two films, because in The Invitation, it kind of messed with my mind afterwards, and I was thinking like, how did it get under my skin this way, right? Like because it's just a stare, it's a comment. It's like, like how he goes to the door and just unlocks it. It's like, it's okay. Mm-hmm. It's like, it's just like the perspective of knowing how to unnerve an audience without having to beat them over the head with jump scares and, all the horror tropes of blood, gore, etc. Because there is blood, there's gore, and that's fine. But if it's paced properly and you've already put the audience in that place, in that zone, we had I don't know if you had the chance. Did you have a chance to utilize your Filmmaker pass at all?
I haven't seen anything yet, no.
There was a film last night that I think you would have really enjoyed, and it's called My Heart Can't Beat Unless You
I've
Tell
seen
it
around I should check it out because it's played at a lot of similar festivals to us.
Yeah, no, it's amazing, and he was talking about like this concept of like horror and smart horror and what people consider to be smart horror. Like it's not just The Witch. That's not the only definition of it, in Midsummer, and this is not the only concept of smart horror. And then he said, Jonathan said that he really liked Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I was like, I think that's an example of smart horror.
Yeah, I think that there's a term called elevated horror, which bothers me a lot because I feel like horror in general has always been pushed aside as low art in the way we kind of categorize film, especially because there is a huge variety of things in film. So to kind of then subcategorize something that's already kind of being pushed to the side just seems unfair. And it's, you can have something like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is not maybe clear with its themes and maybe is going on the surface is exploitation. But there's a lot atmospherically that's going on there. There's a lot viscerally. There's a lot of like film techniques in that are just like very, especially for the time, like super, strong and interesting. So it does feel weird that we're now, I don't know, in this place now because of things like Hereditary and Midsummer, which I like both those films, but this kind of categorization of high and low art within this genre, because things can do both, and that's kind of what's great about it, is like you can enjoy something on a surface level, or it could be, deeper if you want to be, or it's very kind of open for interpretation as well. There could be so many readings of something. So it's kind of weird how we're looking at horror in that way of like it being smart or something,
I completely agree, and I think genres, as well as the concept of directing questions to just a director. You know what I mean? Like sometimes like you're at a Q&A and people won't know what to do when they're asked to ask a cinematographer a question or whatever. So we sort of generalize for the audience. We say, this is horror, this is a documentary, this is animation, this is a drama. So it's to make it marketable, maybe. But I think if you actually get into the craft of filmmaking in a very serious way, I think maybe there's a case to be made that there's an element of horror in every genre. That there's an element of suspense, comedy. There's nothing that's strictly horror, right?
Yeah, so, it's such a wide range, and that's why I really love it kind of as a genre to work in. But I mean, that was kind of my worry, not worries, maybe not the right word, but definitely with this film, it doesn't necessarily go very gory or very like, horror with a capital H. Like there's lots of kind of drama elements about it too, but I think that's what I like about it is like, you know, there's such a wide variety of things you can do within that. You can be more psychological. You can kind of utilize those tropes and subvert them. So I think there's so much to kind of play with that people do, and that's what makes it really kind of endlessly fascinating.
It's fun to try and categorize things. I think it's like a human nature to try and put a title or a label on something, but we'll never. I mean, words fail us, right? Like, it's always a best estimation. I think the film, we've often called it a psychological horror. And I think going back to your comment about getting under the skin and kind of creeping you out, for me, the reason that happens, because actually when I watched it recently, it creeps me out too, because it's been such a long time since we shot it that I have that distance and I can watch it and also be scared and unnerved by it. I think it's because the horror is founded in or rooted in a relationship gone totally wrong. And that is so relatable. Obviously, we haven't been specifically in Rowan's shoes, but we've certainly had relationships that aren't great or aren't, going the way that we want them to. And there's something so kind of human and normal and real about it that twisting it and pushing it to the real extreme is what makes it unnerving. From my point of view.
What drew you to this character, apart from, you know, that you had a pre-existing relationship with Amelia and you guys are friends, and it's probably a hell of a lot easier to work with people that you already know and trust. But
yeah, especially for a film like this, where she's like, you're going to be barefoot in the snow in February in Montreal or Quebec. It's like, sign me up. Yeah, what drew me to the character, like any character, is, does it terrify me? If it terrifies me, I should probably do it. If it's not scary, and I don't mean that in the context of horror at all.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, it's like if I can do it in my sleep with my eyes closed, why am I bothering? But this script, I picked it up. I was like, oh God, like, can I make this work? Can I pull this off for Amelia, for myself, for the whole crew? Like, you know, definitely, I think that self-doubt is a good thing, because I think it fuels us to push ourselves, to really challenge ourselves to do something new and not play it safe, basically. So that was the main thing that drew me to Rowan. But beyond that, I really loved the relationship between her and Lauren's character, Emily. And I love that, like, the simplicity of the story. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, like, to me, the most interesting thing about being alive is the relationships we have with other people. And I love when that is front and center in a story. Like, it doesn't have to have, bells and whistles or explosions or something flashy for it to be really engaging and to hit deep.
Amelia, how important is it to ground a film like this in something that is both personal, but also universally applicable, like what she's talking about, a relationship, right? Like is that a central goal when you're writing a script like this?
Yeah, I mean, I think universality is like what you want, in the sense that you want people who haven't necessarily experienced that to still relate to it and engage with it. But obviously it's impossible in the sense that we can only kind of think about our own lives and our own relationships and stuff. And so I think for me, it's always important to just feel like, okay, even if you haven't directly experienced it, is there some, like, try to think of that, like, is it coming from an authentic place? And so again, what I like about horror is you can kind of heighten these things. So, I was coming from a personal place in the sense that, I've had friendships that, I've felt insecure in, or I felt insecure in myself, or, kind of navigating these like social expectations sometimes can be difficult. If you're more of a kind of introverted person, or, shy or distance or whatever. So that was kind of what I was going for. And I think also there's a kind of, not exclusively, but there's a codependency that can kind of come out of female friendship sometimes that can be toxic. So it was just kind of a matter of like taking that to a more extreme place, but still rooting those anxieties and things that like I've definitely felt, and I feel like people around me have felt, that I've observed, you know, definitely in the kind of dynamic of the single person and the couple, and kind of this like a hierarchy when you know someone through someone else. There's like a kind of gatekeeping of friendship sometimes, or a gatekeeping of closeness that I think I've seen and experienced. So that was something that I kind of wanted to put in through Brendan kind of being there as well, and how he kind of interrupts the two women, but also how Emily is kind of in between them. You know, the scene where she's like, you know, I'm going to bed, and she has this expectation her boyfriend's going to go with her. And then, you know, so kind of subtle things like that, which are nothing to do with horror. That's just like people being people, you know. So those were all coming from like a real place, in an observational place, but then obviously placing it in a horror setting.
I'm curious what your relationship was like with your DP on this, and how much interplay there was in terms of the set design and making it so warm, you know, and so there's like, obviously it's set in winter, so it's cool in that sense, but the interior being warm.
Yeah, one thing actually I talked about with the actors was there being warm and cold scenes in terms of tone and in terms of how they were acting together. So, you know, scenes where everyone's having a good time and like it's all good, and then scenes where it's not all good, but just feeling that warmth and coldness. But then of course that's also reflected by the cinematography and the environment, and letting the environment kind of dictate that. So a cabin in the woods can sometimes feel like a cozy and beautiful, cozy place when there's like a nice fire, but that fire goes out and it's the middle of the night and it's super terrifying and creepy, and you know, like it can kind of have these two extremes. And the place we shot literally did feel like that. I was staying at the cabin because it was low budget and we didn't have anywhere else for me to stay, so I was sleeping on set. And so I definitely experienced those kind of feelings. So yeah, that was kind of the conversations I had with the DP, was kind of what's the feeling of the scene, and kind of, are we in a cozy feeling, or are we in a terrifying feeling, you know?
Fair. And I think that completely answers that question, but I have a kind of spin-off question to that, which is, you know, of course, a performance is created and molded by so many factors, from sound design to, and so I feel sometimes that actors will hear negative notes on a performance that really had nothing to do with their performance. And sometimes they'll be like, how did you do that? They moved the camera. That's how I did that. That's exactly how it happened. It was just a really sharp cut. But so I'm often miffed when I can't quite piece it together exactly why I felt a certain way in a certain scene, and just break it down. And I felt myself going into her head a lot, right? In that sort of immersion between what's real, what's not. Is that a conscious decision that you're talking about with your DP, about like how we're gonna frame her, so like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess more how we approached it was a distinction between what is essentially supposed to be reality and what is a dream sequence. So most of the film is shot handheld, but the dream sequences or hallucinations were shot on tripod or dolly. So the only time we utilize those things is in the dream sequences, which was kind of it was coming more from a place of like scenes that were more grounded in this kind of horror category, were shot sticks or, you know, dolly, and then something that was supposed to be more kind of like character focused would be more like handheld, to kind of just like a really subtle distinction that you might feel like a bit of a contrast. And then there's, yes, and then we also kind of played with that in terms of like her character transition. So at one point when things are more grounded, when Brendan has left, we stayed on tripod for a while. And then when she discovers the box with the scalpel in it, during that scene, it transitions from sticks to handheld within that scene, to kind of be like, okay, we're entering a different, more like uneasy space again. so they kind of represented different things within the film. So kind of subtle things like that, I think make a difference. We always kind of tried to stick with Rowan as much as possible, but that was also kind of easy because she's just like in every scene. But really kind of feel like the camera's with her, and kind of an extension of her, definitely with kind of POV shots, like when we're literally like, through her POV, which kind of create that paranoid feel as well, through doorways or kind of watching, she's a bit of like a voyeuristic character, and that takes on a more paranoid feel as the film goes on too. In the early stages of the film, she's kind of watching Emily or watching the couple with some sort of envy or adoration, or they have what I want, but then that takes a different turn as the film goes on, and she's like, wait a second, what am I really seeing, or what's Emily really doing, So that was something we also utilized a lot, was like her POV, and specifically, like long lens through a doorway, through a window kind of thing.
I've been thinking a lot about that earlier comment about the Candyman vibes, and I can't quite let it go. Like, what the hell did they see in it that drew that? Because it's a strange comparison. But I think there is a scene in Candyman that I was just thinking about where she wakes up in the apartment, and that sort of progression of, do I trust my narrator?
Yeah.
And that element, I think that is what I felt like. I felt like I was losing trust in her perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, what's real, what's not? Like, it's very trippy, and I think that can really help. There's a comment here. Horror is such a boys' club. Any advice to a filmmaker? Any advice?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think film to some extent is a bit of a boys' club. So, and that is changing, and hopefully will continue to change. I guess just, creating stories that feel authentic to you and whatever you want to explore, and it can be looking at something gendered, but it doesn't have to be. It can be whatever, whatever you want, as long as you're passionate about it, and, fuck anyone who tells you otherwise.
It's so interesting how these conversations that we're having are tying together, because I think artists have like a beat or a collective consciousness that they're all like kind of like observing society and feeling everything that's been going on in the world. And one of the things that one of our last interviews said was that she never thought that she could direct. Like she's like that doorway never really even emerged in my mind that I could do that. And I was like, well, who'd you see directing films when you were 5, and how did you understand what a director was subconsciously? I think it helps to see people doing it, right? It does help to see people like Jovanka Vuskovic, like people like that breaking down, like some barriers and some doors. And then I think that every time somebody does something like that, it sparks at least 500 people to say something that I thought wasn't really possible is suddenly possible. So I'm kind of curious where your gusto comes from. Is gusto the right word?
Sure.
Like because you're so young, right? And you're so damn talented. It's almost staggering. You're our first ever Canadian feature selection. In 3 years of selecting features, we've never selected a Canadian feature. This is the first time we've ever selected one. And it's really kind of felt precious to us a little bit that we were selecting somebody who we had such a strong sense of belief in the type of work that you were doing, and more importantly, the type of questions you were exploring with your work. I'm not even sure if there's a question there. I did ask a question, yeah. Then I buried it under an avalanche of comments. Sorry.
Well, no, I mean, thank you. And obviously we're super excited to be part of the festival. Yeah. I think kind of to your point of seeing people who are similar to you do the thing that you want to do. I was really lucky that I had very supportive parents, and I still do have very supportive parents and they both work in art and in film, and it was never really a question of kind of like, can you do it? It's just kind of how, and how are you going to make that work, knowing that you might not make very much money or that you might have a day job, like all those kind of just logistical things, like just figuring out how you can make the thing happen. So I was really lucky to kind of have that support, because a lot of people don't, and a lot of people think, oh, this isn't possible, so that just kind of comes from whatever kind of support system you have, and hopefully people do and stuff, but it's not always the case. I think growing up, all of the filmmakers I liked were all men, but that never made me go, oh, I can't do that. That was never really a question in my head. I think it wasn't until like I went to film school that the discrepancy of directors and female directors, and obviously there's discrepancies in all the categories of film, but directing is kind of one that reoccurring. Like I think this year there's 2 women nominated for Best Director for the Oscars, and that's the first time like ever or something, because it's just this kind of one category that is very male dominated, because you think director, you think Steven Spielberg, and that's just this kind of like image that we have. And so that's going to impact, people of color and women, and like a huge variety of people who don't really fit that mold, of like the dude with the hat going like, action or whatever. But I think that ultimately for me, it was just, like I was lucky in the sense I never really questioned the gender thing until I just was like, I just want to be a director. And I didn't really think about the fact how underrepresented a lot of people were in terms of storytelling. And it's it's a conversation that everyone's having, rightly so. I think it kind of depends on, there's a certain point too where the conversation kind of not should stop, but if it's just always at the forefront, I worry that it also maybe takes away from the work itself. I think it's also a very individual thing, whether you really want to have your identity as part of kind of your filmmaking, because I don't think everyone is that way. So I think kind of as a personal thing too, like Ava DuVernay is very like, I'm a Black female filmmaker. And she's like, and that's, why would I say it in any other way? But another filmmaker might go, well, I don't want to be categorized in a certain way. I just want to make my work and let it speak for itself, So I think it's just a really personal thing of how you want to navigate these things.
Do you think of yourself as a female filmmaker, or do you just think of yourself as a filmmaker?
I don't know. After the whole spiel, I was like, I don't know.
That was literally.
I kind of go back and forth, I guess.
I was so proud of myself as a nugget of thought came into my head. I was like, I'm gonna ask her, does she think of herself as a female filmmaker, a horror filmmaker, or a filmmaker, and what a progression it would be if we could just say Amelia Moses is a filmmaker, as opposed to adding all of this other stuff to it, because it's a deeper conversation for a different time, obviously. But I consider it, it's a term, otherisms, right? The minute you need to asterisk or add a hyphen to something, female filmmaker. I've never heard the term male filmmaker in my life.
Yeah, there you go.
It sounds weird.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it kind of subconsciously promotes the idea. I'm like, man, my entire pandemic has been spent like waxing poetic and thinking subconscious biases and shit. So it kind of lends itself to the idea that it's perpetuating this subconscious idea among the masses that anything that doesn't fit this has to be branded as different than this. And it's kind of creating a very fine line between this is the line and this is what this is supposed to be. It's like, this is a banana, this is a rotten banana, right? Nobody ever said this is a healthy banana or this is a, like we don't feel the need to do that, right? But it's like when you add that, I think that comes with connotations about the type of projects that you're supposed to make. If you're a horror filmmaker or a female horror filmmaker, it's like, I think you're evoking a ton of things, but all of those things that you're evoking are they're limitations. It's like you're trying to box somebody in into something. And interestingly enough, I don't really think that you've made it's been a controversial thing. I didn't really like this film because it was a horror film. I liked it was a good film. You know, it's kind of like it extends beyond genre. Like I don't even see genre personally when I'm programming. Like I get that we have to look at genre when we're programming because we have to tell people what the hell they're about to watch. And sorry, excuse me, what's happening? I've been literally talking all day, so it's like so much communication. But yeah, like it's I think all of these things are limiting. So maybe I know that Ava calls herself a Black female filmmaker, and I think that there's a place for that because it's announcing it very proudly.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that part of it works, right? But maybe that becomes an endpoint to getting to a point where we don't have to say it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's like if we keep talking about it, it's important to have those conversations, but at a certain point, those conversations then kind of become the whole thing rather than just looking at someone. You're a filmmaker or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, so
we have a question here from ATG. Speaking of trusting the narrator, have you seen Kim Ji-woon's A Tale of Two Sisters? It blurs which character's view is the correct one. When we don't trust, it adds to the creep factor.
I have heard of it. I don't think I've seen it. But I have heard of it. I will definitely check it out now.
You want to leave it on screen here? Yeah. A Tale of Two Sisters. Okay, that's
yeah,
cool.
It sounds really familiar.
I haven't seen it either. That's so cool. So you guys are probably pretty sleepy at this point, and I'm just rambling on. So I want to ask you a final question: is what's next for you? Because I do imagine that you're working on your next feature.
Ish. Lee and I are working with a writer in Toronto, so we're developing a project together. And then I'm working on a short film right now as well. And yeah. And
you have theatrical plans for Bleed With Me in Canada, US, VOD?
Yeah, so I'm just trying to think of what we can announce.
We can announce
I forget. Sorry, go ahead.
There will be some announcements coming soon about where you can continue to watch Bleed With Me in Canada and worldwide.
Nice.
Yeah, sorry, I can't give more right now. We don't want to don't want to get in trouble with any of our team.
No, absolutely not. And I always forget the call to action because it's just completely like that's just not the way my mind works. It's like, okay, you got to plug this in right here. But I genuinely hope that everybody who tuned into this film will talk about this film because I think indie filmmaking is really bloody hard, and nobody here has like billions of dollars to blast this, with ad campaigns and stuff. So I think film festivals very much do exist for this reason. Hopefully, so that the people who discover it early can then brag to their friends and hype it up and be like, hey, I saw this at this film festival. I'm so much cooler than you. And that's pretty much that. So thank you guys for staying up with us so late. I'm tired. I'm
not surprised.
I'm a little bit sleepy. I'm like, my God. But it's my God. But it's been so humbling to finally select a Canadian feature. Like, I mean, I would never. It's never been in my head of like, it's gotta happen. But I was like, when it does happen, it's gonna feel like a little bit special because I'm Canadian.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much. Thanks for chatting.
Thanks for chatting. See you guys. Bye.